Greetings Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Good evening. Welcome back, everyone, to the Maverick News Channel. Great to have everybody here. It's, I don't know what kind of day I would describe today as. It's an eventful day, not a pivotal day, not a milestone day, but there is a lot of news to get caught up on. The French government falling. We have Bitcoin surging in price, getting well over 100,000 US and then falling back. So it has been a bit of a roller coaster ride there today. We'll take a look at everything going on there. And the former president of Ukraine went to the Council on Foreign Relations, Poroshenko, making some statements that I found extremely interesting and revealing. We'll share some of that. And then, of course, Tucker Carlson drops his interview today with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. I took a brief look. I became aware of the interview going public about an hour ago. And I have taken a brief glance at it. And we might get into a little bit of it. I'm not sure where tonight's program is going to go, honestly. We might do a little of this, a little of that. We might even do a little bit of Truspiracies tonight. So stay with me.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarmingly, some media outlets simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
In an ocean of lies a century deep, the truth awaits. Choose not the red pill. Choose not the blue pill. For both are an illusion. Discover the power of M. The power of individuality. We are Mavericks. We are the way to the light. Fear not the storm. Join our quest for truth. Truth will set you free. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, we're back. Where shall we begin tonight? Oh my goodness. Bitcoin, I guess, right? Yeah, surging to over $100,000. I should have, I guess, brought up a chart for you. But needless to say, well, let's do that. Let's take a look at the Bitcoin price chart. I think it's sitting around 96,000 US right now. Yeah. You know, just bring up this page. What a roller coaster ride this has been today. 96,637.13 USD. Right there. $96,637 US. So that's today. Let's go to 1 month. And you can see that's not the all-time high. The all-time high today, that doesn't look quite right to me. No, that's not it. Well, here, let me, sorry, we're still dealing with some technical problems here today. internet issues. But it did get over 100,000 US. And a lot of this, of course, is being fueled by expectations that when Donald Trump finally takes office as president again, he will create a more Bitcoin-friendly regulatory environment for cryptocurrencies. And I just want to see if I can find that price chart for you again. So yeah, it went up to, let me take a break while I get this queued for you, because again, I'm still having some technical problems, but I'll get it on track here in just a moment. I'll be right back. Just don't go away. We've got a...
He's a fighter. He's a survivor. President Trump, defiant, strong. He is determined to make America great again. Pay tribute to the 45th President of the United States with this collectible t-shirt from the Maverick News Memorable Moments collection. Even a would-be assassin's bullet could not stop him. Instead, he emerged with his fist in the air ready to fight for freedom. Get your Trump Fighting for Freedom t-shirt with any donation of $30 or more to Maverick News. There are 2 iconic artistic designs to choose from, but there is only one way to get these. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Support free speech, free media. Support Maverick News. Call 1-866-248-1490 or order online at supergeeks.tv.
Yeah, so it actually got all the way up to like $104,000 today, Bitcoin. Pretty incredible stuff. So here you go. Let's pull that down. So you can see right now it's at 96,006. 102, 102, 103. Got all the way up to 104,000 today. It's been, hovering for the past week or so around 95, 96,000, dipped down to 93, back up to 96,000. And a lot of people, I've been sitting and watching it. You could tell that people wanted it to go through that $100,000 ceiling, and it did it today, but now it has dropped back down below the 100,000 US mark to 96,000. A lot of optimism out there surrounding Bitcoin, with some people now eyeing $200,000. And I don't know. It seems to me that it is because of the unregulated nature of all of this, it just seems to me it's exciting, but also extremely dangerous. Because I think a lot of people are actually borrowing money to buy into Bitcoin and other cryptos. More and more of them coming online all the time. And it has a pre-Depression era mania about it. It seems to me this is a reflection of the Roaring '20s, in a way, just because people seem to be throwing caution to the wind. Just buy any stock. What does it matter? It's all going up. That's the way it was in the '20s, right before the big crash. And then, of course, we got the dirty '30s after that. And the appreciation in value has been... I can't think of anything that has been like Bitcoin In the past month alone, Bitcoin has increased in value about, well over 40%. That's just mind-blowing. Where else do you get a return on your investment like that? And yet, what is it based on? Really nothing other than adoption and trust in it, confidence that it's somehow real. The public just adopting it. There's nothing else really backing up Bitcoin. I have a little bit of Bitcoin that I bought quite some time ago. And of course it has gone up in value, but I'm not rich. But not by a long shot. It's just a little bit. Like hundreds of dollars worth is all that I have. I wish I'd bought it when it was, $10. Does anybody out there, you guys have any Bitcoin? Or cryptos? Sandy says, yes, online, borrow dollars, money. Yeah, it's not so much a money laundering scheme, Sandy. It's more like just blind faith. See, Bitcoin, people are buying it as an investment, but really, it's just supposed to be a currency. And a currency isn't so much an investment. And even gold isn't really, I wouldn't classify it as an investment. It can be a hedge against inflation. But stocks, investing in a company that produces something, that's more like an investment. It pays a dividend and it can potentially go up in value. Bitcoin doesn't pay a dividend. It's not productive. It doesn't produce anything. It's just supposed to be a medium of exchange. And there isn't, like I say, there really isn't anything backing it up. There's no gold backing it up. There's just people who believe in it. And if it should ever crash, like major crash, if it could go to zero. And if you took all that wealth, all that money, currency out of the system, it would just be devastating to the economy. Because now it has expanded exponentially, and I don't know what the exact market cap is today on Bitcoin, but you're looking at trillions of dollars. And to just suddenly suck all that out of the economy, people would not be able to pay their bills because so many people are now invested in it. And so it isn't so much the accumulated value, it's the accumulated debt that is attached to it. And if people lose that money, they will not be able to pay their debts. If they can't pay their debts, it would set off a huge cascading chain reaction in the economy. It would be the equivalent of a giant run on a bank, which our financial systems are set up to prevent. And those systems and regulations set up after the Great Depression to prevent runs on the stock market and so on. But a lot of those provisions, those checks and balances, are not really in place for cryptos. So I just think it's very volatile. The more it inflates like a bubble, I think the more dangerous it becomes to the world economy. Certainly the West, but even the world economy. And then people posting stuff like this. Let's take a look at this.
I'm right here watching history be made. Bitcoin is up to $100,000. That's an all-time high, and it's continuing to rise. I've seen it break 3 times today. Went up to 110, and this is the highest that it's ever been. It's ridiculous. Look at, we had last trade 2 Bitcoin for $100,000 a piece. $11 a piece. That's amazing to me. I mean, just look at this graph. You see this graph? That's the last. This is just the last 3 minutes. Give me a second. I'll switch it up. I'm right here watching history be made.
Watch this again.
Bitcoin is up to $100,000. It's an all-time high, and it's continuing to rise. I've seen it break three times today. Went up to 110, and this is the highest that it's
ever been. It's ridiculous. Look at, we had
last trade
2 Bitcoin for $100,000 a piece.
$11 piece.
It's just
that's
amazing
to
me.
me. I mean, just look at this graph.
Look at this graph.
You see this graph? That's the last.
This is just the
3
last
hours.
3 minutes.
Give me a second. I'll switch it up.
It is amazing. I mean, it is truly amazing. Who would have thought that people would buy in to an idea, a concept like Bitcoin, which is just bits and bytes, zeros and ones out in cyberspace, and buy into it as a medium of exchange, money, an alternative financial system even, just based on pure faith, nothing more. Maybe a little bit on greed, maybe a lot on greed. And people just keep pumping money into it. I don't have anything necessarily against it. I just see, I see both sides of the equation there. But you know, the other thing is government and talk of government buying up Bitcoin. RFK Jr. talking about initially buying up a lot of Bitcoin to create a Bitcoin reserve within the U.S. government. That's one of the things really driving the price up, because that, even just talking about it, is creating demand. And if government starts buying up large amounts of Bitcoin, that will really push the price up, because they have the means to buy up so much of it. And the more demand there is, the higher the price will, for anything will go. $100,000. For what? Bits and bytes. It's not gold. So pray it doesn't go to zero. Pray that it is somehow stable. I don't know. I'm a little bit leery of all this. Anybody else worried? I don't know. All right, let's take another quick break. We're going to come back and talk about other news. Stay with me.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Turn our attention briefly to what's going on with the conflict in Syria. Of course, we've seen significant escalation in Syria with these new developments in this, I guess it's almost 14 years since that conflict began. We've seen significant developments there in the last few days. In what marks one of the most significant rebel offensives in years, Syrian opposition forces have launched an aggressive campaign in Aleppo. And this assault, which began a few days ago, has seen rebels now, including the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, take control of a majority of that city, a strategic and historic center. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reports that these fighters have captured towns and villages around Aleppo, advancing towards the city's business hub. This sudden push has displaced thousands and reignited fears of a broader regional conflict, especially given the concurrent conflicts involving Israel, Hezbollah, and Hamas in neighboring regions. Trying to understand exactly what's going on there is pretty difficult because it's very fluid. It isn't just two sides fighting. There are multiple players involved in what is going on in Syria. The United States being, fingers being pointed at the U.S., of course, just by default. But I wouldn't say in this particular case the U.S. it's not necessarily the major player here. Well, we have seen some A-10 Warthogs involved in airstrikes. It is not really reflective of a U.S. dominant position or involvement in the overall conflict. You have Turkey backing these rebels, the United States backing Kurdish forces. The offensive has caught many off guard. The Syrian government, of course, is really a proxy of the Russian government. Russia props up Assad and has for a long time. He's their guy. And that is really the Russian toehold into the Middle East, Syria. So as I say, this offensive has caught many off guard, including the Syrian government forces, which are backed by Russia and Iran. The Syrian army, alongside its allies, has been accused of launching airstrikes in response, targeting areas now under rebel control. In the broader context, the Syrian civil war has resulted in a humanitarian crisis of staggering proportions. Over 16.7 million Syrians require humanitarian assistance, with internal displacement figures at an all-time high. And the situation has been further exacerbated by the influx of refugees from Lebanon following intensified hostilities there. So the United Nations, various international NGOs continue to provide aid, but the ongoing violence and political roadblocks make it challenging to reach all those in need. The displacement caused by both the war and recent natural disasters, like in the 2023 earthquake, has left millions in dire straits in Syria. And as the battle for Aleppo intensifies, it's now under rebel control. And we're seeing the rebel forces make territorial gains in other areas as well, moving in on one of the other major cities, Hama, and we'll continue to follow this story in the days ahead. It's a very complex political situation, and it is very hard to really make sense of it all. I can tell you this, it absolutely affects what's going on here. It's an extension of what's going on in Ukraine, Gaza, Israel, Lebanon, and even politically here back in North America, in the United States and in Canada. It's not isolated. That much is certain. What the dynamics politically are surrounding all of this, I think it will become clearer in the days ahead. So we'll just keep on watching it. Now, there was also, talking about all of everything going on in the Middle East. I came across this piece by journalist Olivia Reingold, who infiltrated the American Muslims for Palestine convention. It's a summit devoted to, it's anti-Israel, that's for sure. And I'm going to run this you might want to check out her full report. I'll share this preview with you. I found it interesting. And here we go.
I am at the Palestine Convention being held outside of Chicago by American Muslims for Palestine, which is a group currently facing a congressional probe for its alleged ties to Hamas, which really is the elephant in the room here. No one seems to want to talk about Hamas. In fact, most, if not all, of what they seem to want to talk about is Israel.
The past 11 months of this genocide has lifted the veils to show you that the Zionist system within the United States, there's a perception of power and then there's real power.
It's a pretty hostile media environment. That's why I'm whispering. I'm also covering my hair because this is a pretty observant crowd. Right now you're hearing the call to prayer. Kefir themed everything, watermelon themed everything. And this is really an opportunity for people to get excited about the cause. There's programming for kids as young as 3, for teenagers, also for college students. They have like a going to campus activism track. There's been a lot of discussion about how to prepare for potential legal consequences, what to do if you are arrested, how you can connect with what's being called the social justice community and adapt the Palestinian narrative to reach new people. This is a movement that is trying to figure out how they can expand beyond the Arab community. Read the full story at thefp.com.
So you can check out her report, and tomorrow night we're going to have Jeff Evely on again. At least he's scheduled, should work out, to discuss geopolitics and the threats that currently face Western democracies. I'm excited to have Jeff back on the program. I always find his analysis thought-provoking, and he has a pretty deep understanding, I would say, of how things work in the world. Pretty pragmatic and insightful. So looking forward to that. Now, as I say, the Tucker Carlson interview with Sergei Lavrov, foreign minister for Russia, has dropped. I'm not going to run too much of it. The reason is two reasons. I haven't had time to watch the whole thing. I was only able to skim it, just scan through it. So I don't want to say too much about it until I've had an opportunity to watch the entire thing. This is not getting as much attention as his interview with Putin did. And from what I've been able to get so far from it, I don't think there's much of anything in this interview that has not already been said. And a lot of it is a repeat of Russian narrative that, well, I take issue with some of it. Where'd you go there, Tucker? Here we go. Let's just run. I'm just going to pick a section here right near the beginning and just run some of this randomly for you, and we'll see where it goes.
Iranians would not be able to do what they're doing with long-range modern weapons without direct participation of the American servicemen. And this is dangerous, no doubt about this. We don't want to aggravate the situation, but since ATACMS and other long-range weapons are being used against mainland Russia, as it were, we are sending signals, and we hope that the last one, a couple of weeks ago, the signal with the new weapon system called the Reshnik,
yes,
was taken seriously. However, we also know that some officials in the Pentagon and in other places, including NATO, they started saying in the last few days something like, well, NATO is a defensive alliance, but sometimes you can strike first because the attack is the best defense. Some others in Stratcom, I think, Buchanan is his name, representative of Stratcom, he said something which allows for an eventuality of exchange of limited nuclear strikes. And this kind of threats are really worrying, because if they are following the logic which some Westerners have been pronouncing lately, that,
okay,
well,
I honestly, look, the threats to use nuclear weapons have been coming from Vladimir Putin. It's just straight up, that's the way it's been. And this whole NATO expansionism thing, it doesn't hold water. It just doesn't. Somebody messaged me today and said that Trump is going to have a difficult time if he doesn't, with Putin, when he negotiates, as though he can negotiate on behalf of Ukraine. I think Trump is going to find out that Ukraine wants its sovereignty. The thing about this is that Trump is going to have trouble with Putin, because, you see, the truth of the matter is Putin never saw Ukraine as an existential threat. And the proof of that is the Kursk invasion. The Kursk, not even invasion, it's just the Kursk offensive, where Ukrainian troops literally walked in virtually unopposed into Russian territory. Why did that happen? Because Putin had no defenses there. He never expected Ukraine to cross the border, let alone NATO, because he never thought that it was any kind of a possibility. He never expected it. He doesn't see Ukraine as a true existential threat to Russia. If he was really worried about Ukraine being an existential threat, he would have fortified borders. He would have had troops there to defend the border. But there was nothing, because he didn't think that there was any chance. Ukraine would never even think about it, because they don't have the manpower, they don't have the resources, they don't have the weapons, they don't have the backing, enough money, enough of anything. They just don't have the resources to go into Russia and pose any kind of real threat existentially to the government. At least they didn't. He thought he was going to waltz into Kyiv almost 3 years ago, and take over the rest of the country in a matter of days, in less than a week. And it didn't work out. He miscalculated. And by doing that, he's basically guaranteed that now he is facing real opposition. Still not an existential threat to Russia. If that were the case, the Ukrainian forces would be moving further and further and further into Russian territory. And there are a limited number of these ATACMS and Storm Shadows that are being provided, a very limited number. And even now their use is limited. because they're being told they can only use them within a certain distance and only to target military targets, like rocket launchers that are being used to launch rockets and missiles at Ukraine. So while we have this interview that is dropped from Tucker Carlson, we also have General Clark on Piers Morgan. And to provide equal time, we'll pick that up and see what he has to say. Again, I have not had time to even vet this, but another perspective. Let's pick up General Clark with Piers Morgan.
I was in Ukraine on the 31st of March. I went through Maidan. I talked to the people. I looked at the lamppost where Putin's henchmen had killed a bunch of Ukrainians. There were a bunch of bullets still embedded in the lamppost. I followed it very, very closely. I don't know exactly what you want to talk about. If I'd been on your panel, I would have probably disagreed with most of them. The people in Ukraine are fighting for democracy. NATO didn't push itself to the borders. It was drawn to the borders by the people in Eastern Europe who wanted freedom. They wanted freedom from Russian oppression. That's why NATO expanded in response to them, not because NATO wanted to expand. It's because in order to stabilize, you had to be able to provide investment, and to get investment, people needed security, and they were living in fear of Russia coming back. Now, when did Putin decide to come back? As soon as he became president in 1999, at the speech he made in the inauguration of President Kuchma in Ukraine. Putin said, Ukraine and Russia, we're more than brothers, we're in each other's souls. Poland sent its national security advisor to see me after that, said, he's trying to restore the Soviet Union. He's coming after us. So this is a long-held ambition by Mr. Putin. And he's seen weakness in the West repeatedly. And that weakness has encouraged him to move. And it's going to continue until the West shows strength. And that strength means providing much more to Ukraine, bringing Ukraine into NATO, and saying to Mr. Putin very directly, look, stop. We're not interested in strategic arms discussions. We're not interested in investing in your economy. We're not interested in having nice conversations in Switzerland with you until you pull back, return the children, account for the inductees, bring to trial the war criminals that have been indicted in Ukrainian courts, and you owe us close to $1 trillion in destruction of our country. So, Piers, these are very clear lines. This is 1937, 1938. And you would have heard the same kind of apologists for Hitler. You would have heard them saying the peace in Versailles was unfair, and the French, and there's corruption and so forth. There's corruption in every government. It's there in your government. It's there in the United States. It's there in Ukraine, but it's never the same as it is in Russia, where organized crime works as an arm of the government connected to the intelligence agencies to assure that Putin and his cronies get what they want. So I think it's a very difficult time. I don't know how the negotiations are going to turn out, but I would tell you this, that Mr. Trump's in a tough position, because if he gives Putin what he wants, he looks weak to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And if he looks to the rest of the world, China's going to move. We've got in the United States a window now to do something in the Middle East, and I think Netanyahu probably will ask Mr. Trump to do it and pose a choice for the Iranian regime, either knock off the hegemonial aspirations and shut down this arc of resistance, including the weapons to the Houthis, or face the consequences. With Iran, you have to go to the source. With Russia, you have to stand firm. We've had deterrence in place for 70 years. We have nuclear weapons. Putin doesn't want to use a nuclear weapon. He's afraid of nuclear weapons, but he's using them to threaten. So people like your bearded guy whose name I didn't get, these are people who are repeating Russian talking points. It's exactly what the woman from Ukraine said. Now, I will tell you that people in Ukraine are suffering, and they would love an end to this conflict. They didn't choose it. It was forced on them. But the only way it's going to be successfully resolved is by strong U.S. leadership. And Mr. Trump is in a position where no matter what he said about ending the war in 24 hours, he's in a position where he simply cannot and will not concede everything that Putin wants. He won't do it. If he does, you won't make America great again. You'll invite war elsewhere in the world. So I see you brought in the rest of the panel here.
Yeah.
I'll stop.
Well, no, you know what, General? I've interviewed you many times. I've seen you interview many times. I've never seen you quite this angry. It feels to me like you're angry about where things have got to.
Well, Piers, I'm angry about hearing misinformation from some members of your. Okay, now
Can I respond, please?
Can I explain something before you talk, please, sir? I was at the beginning of NATO enlargement. I was there at the beginning. I talked to foreign leaders. I set up the program as a staff officer in the Pentagon. I was the NATO commander who went to Bulgaria and Romania and Estonia and Latvia. And they told me, we've got to be in NATO. They didn't say, hey, if you want us, okay, but you blah, 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 blah. We said, we don't want you. It's too much of a problem. They said, please, please help us. And so that's exactly what happened. That's how we got there. In 2014, when Putin went into Crimea, the Ukrainians could have stopped it, but they asked the United States, what should we do? And the United States told them, give up Crimea. Why? Because we wanted Putin's cooperation in the Middle East and with Iran to stop Iran's nuclear program. When Putin went further in Donbass, we provided information, but we provided no lethal assistance to Ukraine. For all these years, the United States administration was timid in dealing with Putin. It's like one member of the administration said recently, of the Biden administration said, oh, we never expected nuclear weapons. I mean, ooh. Nuclear weapons have been the foundation for Western security since the end of the Second World War. We've had near confrontations with the Soviets. And because American presidents didn't back down, we didn't have war. Now, Mr. Trump has put himself in an extremely difficult position. But all of our talk about Ukraine and telling Ukraine in advance, are you going to have to give up your territory? And by the way, you're not going to be a member of NATO. Let's not do any of this right now. Let's put the forces, let's get the forces in Ukraine the weapons and support they need so that the people who have already been mobilized can have these weapons and provide the reserves that are necessary in Ukraine. Let's leave an open-ended commitment for Mr. Trump. Let's tell the Ukrainians, strike to your heart's content in Russia. You get no sanctuary, Mr. Putin. You started this, you pay the price. And then let's go into the talk with understanding what we want. We want all of Ukraine's land back. We want reparations. We want the children returned. We want the missing people accounted for. And we want the war criminals put on trial. And then we can talk about sanctions relief. No sanctions relief until the conditions are satisfied. And, it's very hard for democracies to be able to stand up to a man like Putin. He doesn't have to worry about re-election. But we need the leadership in the West. I've seen it in some countries. Macron sometimes comes off very strong. Britain has come off very strong in this. And right now, the Biden administration is trying to surge support into Ukraine. And I think President Trump, when he comes in, is going to realize that whatever his relationship is with Mr. Putin and however many times he's called him, he's not going to easily give in and sacrifice Ukraine. He can't afford to. And Putin's already threatened him.
Pierce.
Putin's already told him that he's worried about his safety. That's like Tony Soprano saying to you, I'm really worried about the way you're walking across the street. So I'm not angry, Piers, except that there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Can I get in here and respond now, please?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, General, thank you. Just if you don't mind, I'll bring the others in. I've got to say, you have articulated exactly what I've been feeling this entire time, and I've started to think I was going completely mad.
What you have to do is understand. Putin believes he can't win. So all the discussion in the West about how to preemptively surrender territory and all this it all feeds Putin's appetite. He understands from all this discussion that the West is weakening in its will, and therefore if he just keeps shoving soldiers forward, that eventually the West will comply and cut off assistance to Ukraine and tell Ukraine, good luck, hope you enjoy being part of Poland again, because that's his aim. He doesn't really care about Lviv. What he wants is the north coast of the Black Sea and Odessa, and of course Kharkiv and Kyiv and so forth, and then he wants the rest of Europe, Eastern Europe, that used to be under Soviet dominion. He needs this in order to be able to confront China, and this is the ultimate fear of Russia and its leadership. And they know they can't confront China unless they have control over Eastern Europe, including the Baltics and Poland, and the rest of the Balkan Peninsula. And so it's a long-term geostrategic game. And Jink, I just tell you this: there's no American soldiers over there getting killed, and most of the money that's been appropriated by the United States has gone to buy new weapons in the United States. We're giving them the old stuff, the old ATACMS. We've just recently even reprioritized our military sales program. We're still selling ATACMS to Morocco. Now, why does Morocco need 60 ATACMS? I don't know. But we're selling stuff off Patriots all over the world. That stuff should go to Ukraine. As long as the United States stands firm, we won't have nuclear weapons and nuclear war. Putin doesn't want it either. But he does believe right now that we will collapse, and he will continue to threaten the nuclear and play the nuclear card, because that's the way the Russians play it. And so you just have to stand firm against it. And you need strong leadership, and you need the American people behind you. And what you have to understand is that Putin understands how to manipulate public opinion. In every country in Europe, there are people there saying, just like one of the gentlemen on this panel said, this is crazy, and people are getting killed, and I'm tired of seeing people dying, and we've got to have peace. In 1937, 38, in Europe, everybody had fresh memories of the First World War. It was a horrible experience. A whole generation of British young men were wiped out. The French got so bad that in one group of French divisions, they pulled out every 10th soldier and shot him for cowardice. Nobody wanted a repeat of the First World War. And so Hitler occupied the Rhineland against instruction. Hitler rearmed. Hitler rebuilt the military. And at every stage, there were people who said, well, this is really dangerous, but please, we can't think about it. It can't be another world war. So we're revisiting this in a slightly different form today. If we believe in democracy, if we believe in what we set up, if we believe in the lessons we learned from the Second World War, then we've got to stand firm against Mr. Putin. President Biden should have said to him, look, bud, you come after Ukraine, I promise you, you're going to lose. You're going to lose. But he didn't say that. And he's never said that.
No, he hasn't.
That's the policy has to start. We had a multiplicity of interests with Russia at the time the Clinton administration came in. And the first interest was to control the nuclear weapons that were in Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and the loose nukes argument took priority. And we got legislation passed, the Nunn-Lugar Agreement amendment. Basically, we put billions of dollars into helping control the former Soviets' nuclear arsenal. And as part of that, we assured Ukraine that when they gave up their nuclear weapons, and Russia signed on to this, that their boundaries would be respected. You see, in 1991, Ukraine had already voted in favor of independence. The people in Ukraine never wanted to be under Russian control. It's a separate culture. It's a different language. If you look up, and I don't know if you speak Russian, but apparently you don't, but I do. And I thought, well, I'll just go, brush up on my Russian and be able to speak Ukrainian. It's a different language. And it's a different culture. It's a different history. Ukraine's been independent in the past. And it was one of the first subjects of Russia's imperial ambitions going back to Catherine the Great. And the way that it operates is, it's not a nice colonialism. It's an ugly colonialism in which Russia says, I'm in charge here. I want a part of your business. And they buy people and they influence, and it's a critical period in international policy where we're going to decide whether the rule of law prevails or we're going to go back to the 19th century competition between empires and emperors, and to hell with the people underneath.
Interesting. The other thing that came out today that I thought was revealing was this clip from RT, Russia Today. And they're sort of saying the quiet part out loud. This is about former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, and he has, according to this report, identified 4 world leaders that he believes must go. Yoon Suk Yeol, South Korea, which is in turmoil right now. Emmanuel Macron, France, in turmoil right now. Salome Zurabichvili, and last but not least, Vladimir Zelensky. So what you have is this Russian leader calling for a regime change in, 4 different countries, key, pivotal, strategic countries. 1, 2, 3, 4. And, it's the Russians who keep, and others, but the Russians primarily, who keep criticizing the United States, who keep saying, the United States just wants regime change. It's the CIA that's working secretly behind the scenes, controlling everything, overthrowing governments. And then they point to Benjamin Netanyahu and say that he has a list of countries that he wants overthrown. Well, maybe some of that might be true, but here you are looking at the Russian side, and they're doing exactly the very thing, or calling for the exact thing, that they're accusing the United States, NATO, and Israel, always Israel, of doing. Here's the clip. I'll play it for you. From RT. This is Medvedev calling for the very thing that that the Russians accuse the West of doing. Regime change in other countries. South Korea, France, Georgia, and Ukraine. Georgia, of course, in turmoil right now, too. Macron failed to manage the government crisis and must go. A weakling, backed by the U.S. Georgian president should step down after her term ends, but she's refusing. The expired illegitimate president of former Ukraine must step down. Zelensky. Let me just, I'm going to analyze the language here a little bit too. Yoon Suk Yeol must go. He declared martial law, which Parliament overturned, and then demanded his resignation. A traitor backed by the U.S., future uncertain. Why did he declare martial law, though? Because he wanted to preserve the Constitution. What's going on there is also complicated, not easily understood. I need to learn more about it to understand why he did what he did, but he was saying that he needs to preserve the Constitution. He saw some sort of external threat to the government, apparently. Gee, I wonder from where. Is any of this revealing? manage the government crisis and must go a weakling backed by the U.S. Future uncertain. And Georgia. And we're seeing election results come in there that seem to be, I don't know how legitimate the election really has been there. I think international bodies will give us more information on the legitimacy of the vote there. But it's the Russian-supported party that appears to have prevailed in spite of the massive protests that we've seen from people who have been hoping for more EU, European Union integration. This is a replay of what has been going on in Ukraine. And, well, Russia keeps saying they don't have any interest in expansion or restoration of the former Soviet Union. The actions suggest otherwise. And even this clip from RT, it just says, like I said, the quiet part out loud. You have Medvedev calling for regime change in 4 of these key countries right now, where Russia is clearly involved in spreading instability. And here's, look at this language. The expired, illegitimate president of former Ukraine must step down and disappear. He's not illegitimate. He's not expired. And the assertion that they need to hold elections, we discussed that on this program last night. He has not violated any constitutional law at this point, and at some point they will have elections again, but they're in a state of war, and that's why elections have been delayed. A criminal addict, it says, scumbag, backed by the U.S. His future is pretty clear. Disgraced political exile or public execution. So Russia gets to decide that, do they? I see. Putin keeps saying that, and here's the other thing. Putin, pro-Russian pundits, they keep saying, all Russia wants is a neutral Ukraine. It's not true. Because all Ukraine wants is a neutral Ukraine. Ukraine wants independence. That's what they've always wanted. Not just recently, but that's been the goal since the pre-1940. During World War II, that's what they wanted, was independence. An independent Ukraine would therefore be independent, which would be neutral. Not controlled by Russia, not controlled by any other country, not controlled by the United States. That's what the people want. They want their independence. Now, I know that people have been saying, again, talking about corruption. And I would imagine, as I say, I haven't watched that whole interview with Lavrov tonight yet with Tucker Carlson. You're free to go watch the whole thing. I've alerted you to it, and it's easy to find. And people will be referring back to this clip of Joe Biden, but I'm going to give this context tonight. This is Joe Biden bragging about having that prosecutor fired who was investigating Burisma, that Ukrainian company that then had Hunter Biden serve on and then draw that massive paycheck. For what, I don't know, because he never did have any real expertise or qualifications for the job that he was given there with Burisma. But there's something that you should really keep in mind. And here's the clip. This is the clip that people point to when they talk about corruption. All right?
I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. and I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid. I went over.
So a lot of people point to that and say, well, why should we give them money? They're corrupt. No. Biden and his son, evidence of corruption. Biden was appointed by Obama to go over there to deal with issues of corruption. That was his job, was to flush out corruption. And where did the corruption in Ukraine come from? Historically, systemically, because of ties to Russia and the way business and government is run from Russia, there is a high level of corruption. I've mentioned the International Corruption Index, and Russia ranks worse than Ukraine on the corruption index by far. And that's because, and the corruption in Ukraine was built into the system there because there was so much integration with a corrupt Russian system to begin with. Then Biden is sent over by Obama to help root out corruption because Ukraine is working toward more European Union integration and closer economic ties with the West. But instead of rooting the corruption out, it appears Biden became more involved in it himself. But that's not a reflection on Ukraine or the Ukrainian government that was working to flush out corruption, which was part of the condition that ultimately in 2014, it was a condition of more EU integration. The EU told Ukraine, you must deal with these issues of corruption or we don't want you. And so you had the government start to work toward flushing out the corruption and dealing with it and implementing reforms. And Poroshenko, who was president at the time that Biden is making reference to here, under Poroshenko, they were investigating Burisma because of all of this. But then Biden comes along and says to them, you're not going to give, we have $1 billion for you to help your country in a time of need. But if you don't fire that investigator, knowing full well what's going on there with Burisma, then we're not going to give you, I'm going to make sure you don't get that $1 billion. But so what choice does someone like Poroshenko, the president of Ukraine at the time, really have? He's being held by the U.S. vice president at the time, kind of being held pushed into a position of a real problem. You can't stand up to that guy because he's got the purse strings. You have no legal jurisdiction over the vice president of the United States. He's just going to give you a loan. Or his government is, the U.S. government, and he controls whether you get it or you don't. And so what choice do you have? So, of course, this is what you did. The corruption wasn't coming from Ukraine or the people of Ukraine or even the government of Ukraine in this particular case, although I'm sure there is corruption within Ukraine. There is in every government. But in this particular case, the problem was Joe Biden, or at least it appears so, evidence of it. But we should not be penalizing or punishing the people of Ukraine for the indiscretions and the sins of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and his son. We shouldn't be turning our backs on people in an hour of need, their greatest hour of need, when they're, in fact, sacrificing the flower of their youth, who are making the ultimate sacrifice in defense of freedom and democracy, well, people here don't understand and don't appreciate at all what sacrifices are really being made there. That's why Poroshenko, who's not president now, but he was defeated in an election. He was defeated by Zelensky because Zelensky was more of a peace candidate and was elected more on that premise with that agenda. But Poroshenko went to the Council on Foreign Relations this week, just yesterday, and indicated that the people of Ukraine really don't understand why aid is being sort of restricted. You know, there are billions of dollars worth of aid that have been approved for Ukraine that have never been delivered by the Biden administration, held back. Billions of dollars. And now we're seeing that there's talk about trying to get that money out and at the last minute to Ukraine before Trump takes office. Whether that will happen, I don't know. But people talk about all this money being sent over there, and yet a large chunk of it has been sitting in limbo. Hasn't even been delivered. Why? Under the Biden administration, why do they keep holding back? Well, it's another sign of weakness on the West, as General Clark just indicated. Dysfunction between NATO countries, a sign of fear. Where the West, NATO, has been very reluctant to escalate because they don't want a nuclear confrontation. They've been very afraid of it. And making it very clear they're afraid. It's visible. That's the problem. When someone is threatening you and you look scared and then you give in, they just push more. The only way to deal with a bully is to stand up to them and push back. That's the painful truth that people don't want to address. And we should, corruption. Yeah, it's right there. I showed you. He's talking about it blatantly, openly. But the corruption wasn't coming from the Ukrainian government. The Ukrainian government was trying to stop the corruption. They were investigating corruption. Biden put an end to it. Oh, you're not going to investigate me. You're not going to investigate Burisma. You're not going to investigate my son. And do you remember that phone call to Zelensky that everybody was upset about, and they wanted to impeach Trump over the phone call between Trump and Zelensky? What do you think that was about? It was about that. Trump wanted Zelensky, after being elected, after Poroshenko, wanted Zelensky to reopen the investigation into Burisma and specifically Hunter Biden. He wanted Zelensky to investigate the Bidens and put pressure on him to do that. And Zelensky didn't do that because he didn't want to politicize the legal process, which would in itself potentially be viewed as corruption. If you use the legal system to conduct any kind of a political investigation, that in itself can be viewed as corruption. And so, while it may have benefited Trump politically, it would have been legally a minefield for Zelensky and improper. That's why here in Canada, too, we don't allow politicians to, or at least they're not supposed to, influence the legal system. You can't, as the prime minister, phone up a judge and tell the judge, I want you to rule this way or that way. If you get caught doing something like that, man, your butt is toast. politically and legally. If you, oh, Rick, the legal system's also corrupt. They do it all. No, they don't do it all the time. And even in Ukraine, that's why Zelensky didn't do it. Because he couldn't. Trump didn't like it. Got his nose out of joint about it. He's been holding a grudge over it ever since. I understand, but you see, Zelensky doesn't have the same kind of executive powers that the President of the United States has through presidential immunity, through executive powers, through the ability to just pardon people, or even the power of Vladimir Putin, who, with the stroke of a pen, wipes away war crimes committed by soldiers or other military actors, because he doesn't adhere to the International Criminal Court or the ICJ. I've seen him do it. He's done it on video. It's almost like he brags about it. Just, these soldiers shall not be prosecuted for anything related to these incidents here, blah, blah, blah. That's what happened after the arrests of those terrorists that committed the killings at the Crocus City Hall in Moscow. And then they tortured the prisoners, cut off the ear of one, showed it on social media. What they did, those were actually war crimes. Connected electrodes to genitals, video of it. The Russians posted it. And then Vladimir Putin signed a declaration absolving anybody involved with any kind of war crime or criminal prosecution. And yet, so the Russians are supposed to, under the Geneva Convention, prosecute those kinds of crimes. Nope, just immunity. But Zelensky doesn't have that kind of luxury. He's not a superpower. That's what has been going on. And then Poroshenko, as I said, went to the Council on Foreign Relations, and what a revealing address he had. People are I'm not listening to that guy. You should listen, because you should get all the information from all sides. Not just Putin, not just Lavrov, not just Biden, not just Trudeau, not just Trump, everybody, including Zelensky and Poroshenko, who says that the world better wake up, because this conflict in Ukraine is just a prelude of things to come. Just like General Clark is saying, we need to take note of what is really going on and recognize the real dangers that we are facing right now, lest we repeat the mistakes of the past. Lest we forget. Here's Poroshenko, the Ukraine conflict by the numbers.
Opportunity with Moscow. Is there a window in which opportunities should be used? If yes, how long is it? Especially given that Ukraine will need support and a new supplemental from Congress at the beginning of next year. So what if you look at the next year? What is your instinct in terms of timelines for talks?
I prefer to share this question to two parts. When we should start contact with the President-elect Trump and his team, and if you ask me exact day, my answer would be yesterday. I hate the idea that we lose one single day, because situation is critical. Again, in the next 50 days, it is decisive for the future of the world, not for the future of Ukraine. Every single day when we waste the time, dozens of innocent Ukrainian civilian killing. Do you know how many attack drones of Iran, Shahed, produced in Iran or produced under Iranian license in Russia? Was attacked Ukraine in September. 1,700. Do you know how many Iranian attack drones, Shahed, attacked Ukraine in October? 2,070. Can I tell you the truth? If in any NATO member states, 2,070 Iranian big attack drone attack, no matter Poland, Romania, Baltic states, nobody protect them. This is the new quality of the war. And this war is different from the year 2014, and this war is different from the year 2022. Do you know how many missiles, including ballistic missiles, including Korean missiles, we received just in October? More than 200. Do you know how many air defense missiles we received at the same time? 130. How we can, with 130 missiles, air defense, destroy these type of things? And that's evidence that this is not war Russia against Ukraine. This is the war of Russia. This is the war of Iran. This is the war of Korea, because 40% of this missile was Korean. And who knows where these missiles goes after Ukraine. Do you know what is the price of the artillery shell which produced in Pennsylvania for Ukraine now? More than $6,000. Do you know the price Putin paid to North Korea for each artillery shell from North Korea for the Russian artillery? 450. And what necessary to do? Point number one, define what does it mean victory. And I really appreciate when Ukrainian president delivered the position of Ukrainian people to explain our partner what does it mean victory. I am ready to explain my approach, which I already mentioned. 5, non-compromise. We should switch economy on the military rail. And we should be competitive with the acts of evil, North Korea, Iran, and Russia. Sorry, our artillery shell should cost $500. And that's why we need to produce it more. We need to produce more missiles, but we should not win only by the quantity. We have a technologically advanced nation. And we should learn how to win this battle by technology. Ukraine cannot overman Russia because we have a 1 million people reserve mobilization, and Russia has a 27 million. But the whole NATO coalition is stronger economically and stronger technologically. And we should be over smart and over technology. We have a several stage of the war in Ukraine since February 22nd. First, how we protect Kyiv, and I know what to do, and maybe all of you see me on the Fox or on a CNN every day from Kyiv when I delivered the message with the weapons in the hand when we stopped the Russian. First, we stopped the Russian because of the Ukrainian bravery and unity, and American Javelin, and Love, and Sting. And I'm proud that in Love and Sting we received from President Trump in the year 2017. And that's why we destroy Russian columns who don't go to make a battle. They want to destroy Ukraine, delivering their parade uniform, motivation flag, and prepared to have in a 2 days parade. And bravery, Ukrainian people, Javelin and Stinger, stop and save Kyiv. Very simple. Do you know why we make a very successful operation in Kharkiv and Kherson since April? Again, one name. It's not a Javelin or Stinger because they don't have any column anymore. But the name of our success of operation is HIMARS. And with the HIMARS attack, we destroy completely ammunition storage and everything, and bravery of Ukraine deliver the great success when we make it free. Poltava, Sumy, Kharkiv, and Kherson, significant part of the Kherson region, including the regional center of Kherson. Then Russia is very quickly modernize this, and they make old version of HIMARS blind. And now, again, we should win the battle against Russian attack drones, against Russian FPV drones, against Russian radio electronic warfare system. And if Russia attack Ukraine with the 2,000 attacking Iranian drones, what should we do? We should have 3,000 attacking drones who will attack Russia. And with this situation, the discussion about long-range missiles is simply, sorry about that, ununderstandable in Ukraine. Why they attack object of the critical energy infrastructure, object of the hospital, the university, everything. And we have no rights to give a response on their legitimate military targets. We are on a boxing between, who is it, Usyk and Fury. But Usyk goes with the handcliff. Наушники як би. With the tight hands, okay. And said, okay, this is a fair play. No. No explanation. Ukrainian people don't understand that. And those who said, okay, but it would be danger for the Third World War. I have very positive experience to work with the Trump. But I have very negative experience to work with the Putin for 5 years. Do you know my recommendation and conclusion about Putin? First, you should find out the right language to speak with the Putin. And this is not English. From my practice, he's not understand that. Chancellor Merkel, we try several times to speak with him on German. He do not understand. It looks like for me that he don't understand.
He didn't want to.
I speak with him on Russian. Same results. The only language he understands is a language of our united strength. When we can do that, when we can speak that, he signed Minsk agreement, he stopped offensive operation, and do many, many positive things. So please, let's learn this language. And I definitely count that President Trump knows this language very good. He don't need any interpreter of that. At least I count. Point number 2. Putin goes as far as we allow him to go. And point number 3, don't be afraid of Putin. And don't trust Putin. Don't be afraid victory of Ukraine. And don't be afraid defeat of Russia. Better, more efficient, and cheaper to stop Putin in Ukraine. And for that, we need internal unity in Ukraine. Key messages. Ukraine start to win in the year 2022 because in 3 hours after Russian missiles attacked Ukraine, I was with the President Zelensky. And that was the only time when I met him after the election. He don't want a dialogue with me. But we meet immediately when the war started. And I tell him, Vladimir Alexandrovich, you are not my opponent anymore. And I am not leader of the opposition anymore. And we have one enemy, and the name of this enemy is Putin. And if we do not be united, we lost Ukraine. And he said, yes, Mr. President, let's start with the tabula rasa. What do you need? I said, I need 10,000 Kalashnikov. Because in my office, we have now, after a couple of hours, 2,000 volunteers, and we need to train them, to recruit and enroll them in the battalion, and to protect Kyiv. And point number 2, we should be in Kyiv. And stop attempt of some parliamentarian leave Kyiv, because if authorities, government, parliament, or anybody leave Kyiv, that would be a very strong message to Putin that we are ready to capitulate, and very strong message to the Ukrainian people. We are not going to protect Kyiv and Ukraine. We stay, we understand, we shake hands, we bring the unity, and this has helped us to save Kyiv. Now we should meet internal unity, international unity, and believe me, the window of opportunity for the President Trump after inauguration to speak with Putin also would be very narrow. And we trying to do our best to prepare maximum possible way new administration for the very strong message to Putin, speaking on the language of strength. And victory should be through the language of strength. Thank you.
Okay. Stay with me. I'll be right back.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
So if you're living in Canada, or if you're expecting a parcel from Canada this Christmas or anytime this month, you may experience a delay since the postal strike is continuing. Now, I see this report from the National Post tonight saying that there is a survey that has been done which indicates most Canadians are being affected minimally by the strike. I would take some... I don't think that's necessarily the case, because I was unexpectedly affected 2 days ago when I went to send a parcel out by courier because the post office is not functioning. So here's the story. Most Canadians minimally affected by Canada Post survey, Canada Post strike survey finds. So it says here, as the strike by Canada Post workers nears the end of its third week, a new poll by Angus Reid finds Canadians split in their sympathies between the Crown Corporation and its striking employees. However, the same poll also noted that a sizable majority of the more than 3,000 surveyed said they were minimally affected by the strike, or in some cases not at all. Not surprisingly, given the time of year and the number of Christmas parcels that are sent by mail, most Canadians said they were aware of the strike by more than 5,500 members of the Canadian Union of Post Workers, with 38% saying they were following it closely and another 45% saying they'd seen media coverage and had the odd conversation. 16% said they were just scanning the headlines. So you're getting the picture. Some people are paying attention, others don't care. They don't use the post office that much. But if you use the post office, which I do, I use Canada Post, I'm being affected. Even just sending out T-shirts and keeping up with that kind of thing. Now that we sent a lot of T-shirts out, but the odd one. So I had to send a parcel out 2 days ago. And you know how I was affected? I was affected because Canada Post on strike. I go to the courier service only to find that the rates have quadrupled. 4 times the regular rates. To send a parcel, a small parcel, from Chatham, Ontario, right down here in southern Ontario, to Toronto, over $100. The guy looked at me and said, well, you know, you might not want to send the parcel because it's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to rates have quadrupled. And I'm like, floored. I wasn't expecting that. I thought maybe there would be a bit of a rate bump, but not 4 times that much. That's how Canadians are being affected. Now, I'm sure that companies like Amazon, with their contracts and it seems like they use some sort of an independent courier system. They deliver 7 days a week, and it's not FedEx. Whatever system they have set, I'm sure they're not paying higher rates. But yeah, the average person, we're getting hammered, and even small businesses getting hammered. So I hope that they resolve this postal strike soon. It is having an effect this Christmas. It is. Regardless of what the poll says. Not everybody, because a lot of people don't need to send parcels out in this digital age. Now, back to fears of World War III. The head of Britain's armed forces is warning that the world stands on the cusp of a third nuclear age, as he's defining it. And he's defining it by multiple simultaneous challenges and weakened safeguards that kept threats in check in the past. This is a warning coming from Admiral Tony Radakin, Chief of the Defense Staff, And he says Britain needs to recognize the seriousness of the threats it faces. He says that they need to do that even if there is only a remote chance of Russia launching a direct nuclear attack on the UK, the US, Canada, or any of the NATO allies. He says while the Cold War saw the two superpowers, the US and Russia, held at bay by nuclear deterrence, mutually assured destruction mad, and the past 3 decades have been characterized by these international efforts to restrict the spread of nuclear weapons, he says this new era is much more complex. Radican was giving a speech to the Royal United Services Institute where he says, quote, "We are at the dawn of a third nuclear age." And he says it is defined by multiple and concurrent dilemmas, proliferating nuclear and disruptive technologies, and the almost total absence of the security architectures that went before. Scary times, but we shouldn't walk around being scared. I think we need to stand tall, stand strong, and show strength when threatened so that we don't get pushed around and bullied, so we don't give up. We shouldn't give up on freedom, because that's how we lose it, if we bend the knee. And as much as people are worried about escalation, you know, it's and they point to all of these talking points that I think are ring hollow in the end. Suggesting we should just turn our backs on Ukraine and these other nations that are emerging as being in need, whether it's Georgia or Moldova now, or hopefully not others, but certainly Ukraine right now. And what's going on in the Middle East, it's very unstable. And I think that is a reflection of a weak president who has given aid, but only enough to just kind of sustain, not to win. And you know, I'll bring up this clip. I was torn about whether we should run this or not, but this has been making the rounds. This clip of Boris Johnson. Where people are saying in this interview, I think he was being interviewed on Times Radio. They're saying he admits that it's a proxy war, which is a key phrase that triggers people, and it has been a phrase used by the Russians repeatedly, saying, you see, this war in Ukraine, it's not us, it's a proxy war by NATO. They're just using Ukraine. But it's not it's not proper perspective to simply call it a proxy war and therefore it's illegitimate, and Ukraine doesn't deserve to defend itself because it's just a proxy war and there's nothing legitimate about it. On the contrary, I'm going to run the clip of Boris Johnson that has created this controversy that the Russians are using as ammunition in their information war. Here he is.
We are, let's face it, we're waging a proxy war. We're waging a proxy war, but we're not giving our proxies the ability to do the job. And for years and years now, we've been allowing them to fight with one hand tied behind their backs, and it has been cruel. It has been cruel, and we need now to give them what they need. So we are, let's face it, we're waging a proxy war,
Okay, so that's this brief clip. It's true, but not true in the sense that the Russian information machine wants you to how they want you to process that. It is a proxy war. Of course it's a proxy war, because any smaller government or state that receives aid and arms from larger powers is instantly a proxy. So Ukraine, after voting and pushing and yearning for freedom and wanting more integration into the European Union and not getting NATO membership, of course they're a proxy. Any smaller government or organization that gets aid, especially arms, from larger powers like the United States, the UK, that becomes a proxy of, in this case, the West. Just like Syria is a proxy for Russia, the Assad government. It's a proxy of Russia. Yemen, the Houthis, they're a Russian proxy. It's the same in that context in Ukraine. So in that way, yes, it is a proxy war, because the aid is coming from the larger powers. Because how can a smaller country like Ukraine defend itself against a superpower without outside help? So instantly, when they get the outside help, they become a proxy. Therefore, it becomes a proxy war. But the reason the war is happening is not because, as General Clark so rightly pointed out, it isn't because NATO was pushing into Russia. Ukraine did not attack Russia. Russia invaded and took over Crimea. Nothing was done. Ukraine let it go. Russia pushed into the Donbass after fueling, creating essentially a civil war, using language issues as the foundation for that, for the fuel to disrupt what's been going on in Ukraine, to drive a wedge in between the Russian-speaking population and the Ukrainian population, and they armed the Russian-speaking rebels and then even sent in Russian soldiers to get the civil war going in the Donbass and ramp it up. That was really, when the invasion began. And then, almost 3 years ago now, 1,015 days, actually, I think is what it is, the Russians went in with a full-scale invasion. This was not a war of choice by Ukraine. And it is not a proxy war in the sense that it's NATO, a NATO proxy war against Russia to invade Russia. Quite the opposite. It's Ukraine. It's Russia invading Ukraine. Crimea wasn't enough. Donbass wasn't enough. Not enough of a buffer, I guess. Isn't that what Putin wanted? He wanted a buffer against NATO. Not enough. He says he doesn't want Ukraine, and yet what did he do? He invaded Ukraine. He went right in. He was going to take Kyiv. Well, finally, he got pushed back, and then that was a miscalculation. Putin's mistake. What was supposed to be a 1-week invasion turned into a 3-year disaster with massive casualties on both sides. We're looking now, I think it's somewhere around 600,000, maybe even 700,000 Russian casualties, deaths and serious injuries, debilitating injuries, life-changing injuries, and death. A disaster, horrific for both sides, all sides, because it's not just two. And as you heard Poroshenko say, this isn't just a war now. This is why it's become a proxy war, because this is a proxy war, in a sense, for for the entire axis of resistance versus the West and the NATO countries. And it's all playing out in Ukraine. Russia's using North Korean missiles, Shahed drones from Iran, aid from China and Russia. And they're bringing in troops now from Cuba. Not officially, but I've seen the videos, even interviews with the soldiers who are there, and they're being paid to fight from Cuba. It is a world war unfolding right before our eyes in Ukraine. So Poroshenko is quite right when he says that this is a pivotal moment, not just for Ukraine, but for the world. And the sooner we all wake up and realize that this is what's happening, hopefully it's the sooner we will be able to get to a place of peace. But as we flounder, Boris Johnson was right on this point. What we've been doing, what Biden has been doing in Ukraine, is actually cruel. He has been providing aid, even withholding some on multiple occasions. Once you could say it's a logistics issue, but to continually do it and hold back billions of dollars that have been approved but not actually provided, to provide enough aid to sort of sustain, but not enough to actually win, to impose restrictions and say, we'll give you these weapons, but you can't really use them. Or you can only use them a little bit over there. You can't really, we know they're launching thousands of missiles, but we're not going to let you take out the missile launcher. Good luck shooting down the thousands of missiles. It makes no sense. Poroshenko told us tonight in his address to the Council on Foreign Relations, the people of Ukraine don't understand. I wouldn't understand if my country was under attack and we needed assistance, and we were the cork in the dam, holding back a force opposed to freedom for the entire world, and we're the ones actually, the Ukrainians are the ones really who are paying the ultimate price, the highest price. They're the ones investing the most. They're paying with their lives. What have we done? 1%, 2%, not even, of GDP for NATO spending. And it sounds like massive amounts of money, and it's a lot of money. It is. But really, in terms of what is actually spent overall in defense spending, what it amounts to in terms of the actual budgets for all of the different countries. No, I'm sorry. Regardless of what the amount of money is, young people dying in battle when promises have been made by Western countries, in particular the United States, saying for as long as it takes, these are assurances that we're gonna have their backs. When you make a promise on that level, you damn well better keep it, because if you don't, your word's not worth spit. Too many times through even recent history, the United States has failed to deliver in the end because the United States is afraid of escalation. They're afraid of Putin, depending on who's in the White House. They're afraid of pushback from voters. That's the weakness of democracy in times of crisis. Lack of unity, wishy-washiness, unpredictability, unreliability. How can you be a reliable partner if you're unreliable? If you make a promise, you have to keep a promise, especially when lives are at stake. It's shameful. Boris Johnson is right about that. It is cruel what has been going on, because it has cost lives. The slow rollout of support has cost hundreds of thousands of lives. Instead of going in strong, and this is my opinion, if you're going to do it, if you're going to go to war, you go to war. And you get in it to win it, and as quickly as possible to minimize death. But you drag it out, you show weakness, you allow these things to just drag on, and more people die. That's the highest price that the world can pay. And it's been happening. And that's cruel. If the United States, if NATO pulls the rug out from underneath the people of Ukraine at this point, and this is not a political thing, this is just the reality. This is what Putin wants. He wants us to give up. He wants us to turn our backs on a country in need at their time of greatest need. He thinks we are going to collapse because he's staging a massive information war against the West right now. And he knows his information warfare team knows the buttons to push to get people to capitulate, to give up, to bend the knee, to quit. Because you're afraid that prices might get a little bit too high, or, why should we have to pay to... Well, because it's about freedom. This is what this channel's about. Aren't we about freedom? What happened to the freedom movement? Doesn't anybody care about freedom anymore? We're cheering for the dictator? We're cheering for the guy who wants to nuke us? Yay, Putin? Yeah, well, it's our own fault. Okay, well, see you in hell then, because we're all going to get turned to dust. And the more we capitulate, the more we give up, the more emboldened he becomes, the more likely we are to see him use a nuke. He's lost me, man. I could be very tolerant. I was very tolerant, understanding even of the political views and the multipolar geopolitical reality that is new now, and that bully the United States. Said, yeah, well, you know what? After a while, it just wears thin, and it's pretty clear that there are giant holes in what he's saying. It just isn't true. As I indicated earlier, he's not afraid of Ukraine. He never was. I think he is a little bit now, because he got a big wake-up call with the Kursk offensive. Never expected that. Just waltzed right in, because in his mind, Ukraine and NATO were never a real threat to begin with. That's why they took him by surprise. That's why the defenses that they're running into are really not there. His greatest weapon is fear. His strongest weapon is fear through the information war. There's a battle on for your mind, and he's winning, even here in the West. Because the easiest and least expensive way for him to win the war is to get us to give up. Not just give up on Ukraine, but give up on our own country. Give up on freedom. Give up on everything. He wants you to hate your country. And I see people doing it. That's what everybody was upset about a few years ago. And now they've embraced it. A lot of the people who say they're conservatives, or that they're freedom lovers or freedom fighters, and they're concerned about statues being torn down and history being rewritten. And now I see those same people since the pandemic twisted around, inside out, upside down, actually hating their country, complaining about colonialism, and embracing revisionist history and blaming everything on us. And yet, who is it tonight that's calling for regime change in 4 countries? Former President Medvedev. That's not an accident. That's not him just blowing smoke. That's like a trial balloon. He's saying these things to float that stuff out there so Putin doesn't have to directly. The impact isn't as direct, but it sets the stage. And you're seeing all of this instability in Western countries right now. Where do you think that's coming from? It isn't just from our own governments. It doesn't benefit our governments to be self-disruptive or self-destructive. That's happening from outside forces. Russia is more active and more aggressive when it comes to regime change and influencing what's going on in other countries, even than the United States. The United States is timid. It has been. Always. NATO has been reactionary. Not to say that the United States hasn't made mistakes. The United States is not always the good guy. Sometimes they've done bad things. Sometimes Canada has done bad things. And when that stuff happens, we have ways of dealing with it. And we do. We do. Not always effectively, but we have systems in place, and slowly over time, our systems deal with it and self-correct. And people will be held accountable in time. It's already starting to happen. Corrupt leaders can run, but they can't hide. And even, like I know that it's very disappointing to see that the president of the United States, like Joe Biden, can also, with a stroke of a pen, pardon his own son. But somehow I think it's not over yet. And I'm not so sure that Trump is immune from or is squeaky clean either, because we're seeing him say, I'm immune from prosecution. I have presidential immunity, even as president-elect. That story tonight concerns about that. Yeah, is anyone above the law? Well, I would have to say there shouldn't be anybody above the law. And whatever the law is, I guess if you get away with something as president, but constitutionally you're allowed to do that, then you're not above the law. You're just using the law as written, nevertheless. In the case of Hunter Biden, now, I still have some hope and faith in the system. We have to. Because I'll tell you this, I'd still rather live here than live in Russia. I know there's still more freedom here than there is there. I know the freedom is under assault here. And there are complicated reasons why, but I'm determined to continue to fight for it, to work for it. That's why I'm in the chair here every night. And I will not cave in and give in to people who put pressure on me to capitulate like them, to hate on my own country. I don't support Justin Trudeau, but I haven't given up on Canada. I don't support Joe Biden, but I haven't given up on America. There's more to a country than a prime minister or a president. Always. They come and they go, and the beauty of living in a liberal democracy is that we get to vote, and we are supposed to be able to make changes to our system, make changes to our government, change direction, change course without going to war, without resorting to civil war. That's what this is all about. And it's about freedom. And if we don't work to support others who are trying to support freedom, which benefits us, then what good is freedom at all? Freedom for one, freedom for all. We need to promote that, support it, advocate for it. The people of Ukraine, and I don't, we need to get off the Ukraine thing because we've been talking about it pretty heavy for the past few nights, but my God, just because you have some corrupt politician over here who's skimming money, it doesn't mean you turn your back on the people over there who are suffering. We need to support them because this is not about NATO expansion with Ukraine-specific NATO expansion with Russia. That's just a narrative. It's not truth. That's an excuse. It's not justification for what Putin has done. Even if it's true from that perspective, even if you give that legitimacy, it's because NATO is expanding, so we have to defend ourselves. Bunk, but if you buy into it, it still doesn't justify what Russia has done. No excuse for going into that country. None. It's not his. But Tucker Carlson never pushed back on that in the interview with Putin, because Putin basically asserted ownership over Ukraine. It's ours. It doesn't even exist as a country. It's not legitimate. Yes, it is. It's documented. They have their independence, and that's what the people of Ukraine want. They just want their independence. Independence is neutrality. That's not good enough for Putin. He wants someone in power there that he can control, which is what he had leading up to 2014 with Yanukovych, who was the president. That was his boy doing Putin's bidding. He wants that back. He doesn't want neutrality. That's not good enough for him. He wants a government that appears to be independent but is actually controlled by Russia, because he'll have a corrupt president in power that he's supporting, propping up, that is a puppet. And the people who are suggesting that Zelensky is just a puppet of the U.S., think again. The evidence proves otherwise. The evidence shows that, one, he didn't give in to Trump with the investigation into what potential political corruption, because he couldn't get involved in a political investigation, and he didn't get approval from Biden to do the Kursk offensive into Russian territory, which Biden never would have approved. NATO never would have approved it. He did that on his own because he is independent. That proves it. Don't judge by words, judge by actions. Brilliant strategy, by the way, because now he has a bargaining chip when Trump comes back and they go to the negotiating table. Now he has something to bargain with to try and get some territory within Ukraine back. Nobody saw that coming. Not the West, not NATO, not Putin. The history books will tell tales that have never been told quite this way before in the future. And that is the other thing we need to remember. The victors of war get to write the history. And we need to be very careful about that. Because if we, as Boris Johnson says, continue to be cruel and don't give Ukraine the support they need to actually prevail in some just way, the people of Ukraine will not understand. We risk losing Ukraine. Because the people of Ukraine will look at this and they will say, why did we make this ultimate sacrifice? Why did we sacrifice an entire generation of young men in this battle for freedom, only to have NATO, the West, the United States, Canada, the UK turn their backs on us? And rightly so. And then in the future, they will be turned against us. An ally today that will very likely become a Russian proxy tomorrow. Their ingenuity, their bravery, and their valor turned against us. For letting them down, for giving up on freedom. Think about it. Really think about it. I love you guys. Keep fighting for freedom. I will. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern. Right here on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.